and welcome to, I think this is this year's biggest Interact event when looking at the number of participants. And I would assume also one of the most awaited events because we know that you have plenty of questions regarding tourism and culture in the upcoming programming period. And we are also very happy to have the combined power of our colleagues from DG Regio with us, both covering the 1 and the 2 units. And what we are going to use the next 30-40 minutes for is to hear from our Commission colleagues how tourism and culture is reflected, especially in PO4, but also the other policy objectives, with a general introduction done by Nathalie Verschelde, then an outlook into tourism and culture in PO1, 2, 3, and 5 by Olivier Baudelaire and Johan Magnusson, and then looking at PO4 by Katalin Pences and Magali Lenoel. After that, we have a few questions in our, let's say, backbone, which we could ask, depending if there are any major gaps, anything which immediately we feel triggered to ask. But then after that, we will go into the question and answer session, where you have then, and you know the system, how it works, where you have an opportunity to ask whatever you want to ask our Commission colleagues on tourism and culture in the policy objectives. Having said that, I would give the floor now to Nathalie, and I understood that you will then just switch from one person to the other, and you just let me know whenever you want the slide to be switched to the next one. Nathalie, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Philip, and good afternoon, or good morning, good afternoon to everyone. As already mentioned by the colleagues in Interact, I think indeed this is the event that you've all been waiting for. And we all hope in D1, D2 that we have some good news to share with you today. Good news that we all need in these times. Interact insisted that I should put my camera on. I was not very keen on that because we've been prevented from going to the hairdresser in Belgium now for 6 weeks, and it's not until the next 4 weeks that we can go. So I'm desperately looking for a legal way to get a haircut that doesn't involve my children, preferably. So bear with me if I don't look tidy and clean. This is the Belgian government to blame for, or the virus if you want. I will start with some general remarks. You can move on, Philip, thank you. Very general remarks as an introduction to this session, and then my colleagues will step in to go more into the nitty-gritty of how tourism and culture should be supported or can be supported in the next programming period. First of all, some things that you probably already know, but it's good to look at the extent to which Interreg already contributes to the tourism and culture sectors. These are the figures here on screen only from the 2014-20 period, where you can see that over 2 billion euro from the Interreg programs has actually gone to supporting culture and tourism, with thousands of projects and thousands of partners involved in this. So we all know that tourism and culture are important elements of the Interreg programs over the years. In the next slide, just to remind everyone that, of course, tourism is not only relevant, but it's also very suited to Interreg support. It's linked to territories, so that's why we've also linked this presentation to the bringing territoriality to programs in the future period. Very often, tourism in particular is linked to either mountain areas or seas, islands, rural areas, urban, of course, centers. So that's very relevant for us. It's very multidimensional. You will see in some slides coming up. It's also long-term. You don't necessarily develop a tourism strategy or a tourism destination just for the next 5 years. It's very often with, of course, a much longer strategy in mind, and it does involve many stakeholders, local authorities, but of course also civil society and the private sector. It's also very well supported within the macro-regional context. Again, because it's multidimensional cross-cutting, it fits very well with the integrated approach that we sell through the macro-regional strategies, or macro-regional context in general, not necessarily just the 4 strategies. Again, multi-level governance is key in this, and it really brings benefit to work within this context now and in the future. And in the macro-regional strategies that we have, the 4, tourism and culture have also often been identified as priority areas, and at the end of the presentation, you will hear some very concrete recommendations from our teams on the linkage to the macro-regional strategies. So tourism is, yes, thank you, Philip. Tourism is important. Tourism is linked to the territories of our programs. And our message is that for some program areas, as we already discussed with you in the training on PO5, we still consider that PO5 is the best way to invest in tourism and culture, probably even more in tourism than culture, because of this territoriality and the integrated multidimensional and multi-level governance that I mentioned earlier. So we still consider that PO5 is an appropriate place for investing in tourism, but for some program areas, of course, not for all program areas. If you look at some transnational programs, I think the way in which PO5 needs to be implemented, the conditionalities that are connected to PO5 might be a bit too complex and too heavy. But if you look at some cross-border programs, internal and external, really there is potential for PO5 to be the place. However, we do have a new option that has appeared late in the negotiation stage with the introduction of the specific objective 4.5 under PO4. And one of the main objectives of today is a little bit to clarify what can go into that new option on the menu. But the good news is that we consider that tourism and culture activities can be supported under any policy objective, I mean 1 to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where it is relevant, and really based on the intervention logic that you will use for your programs. And really, that's our key message for today. It's really that let's not get bogged down into very technical questions. Can I do this? Can I not do that? Can I do this under PO2? Or, no, the logic has to be where, what are the needs? What are the assets of my program area? And what are my priorities? And how am I going to get there? How am I going to change what I want to change? And if it requires supporting tourism under PO1 or under PO4, this has to be dictated by the intervention logic. And it can be done under PO1 to 5. So then at this point, I guess many people can just switch off and go home, because that's all the news they wanted to hear. But we will then, of course, explain a little bit more in detail how we see this in the next programming phase. Now, I would like to simply share with you some slides that we have included in the presentation, because they illustrate the importance of tourism, in particular in our European economy. I won't go into details of the slides, but they are there so that you can look at them later on. You might even use them if you have to make the case with your stakeholders. Tourism is just absolutely a massive part of our economy, socioeconomic development in Europe, we have here what our colleagues in DG GROW, responsible for tourism, call the tourism ecosystem. And you can see that really it involves a lot of operators, from the accessibility and moving around, transportation, to providing accommodation and services and entertainment via operators or independently. I mean, you name it, it's all included in this ecosystem. And this is really the ecosystem that we want to support in the future, possibly maybe in a more sustainable manner than we have done. And that's another discussion that we need to have, is, you know, the shift to a more sustainable world in general, the green and digital transitions that are also part of the concepts that we want to use for the next programming period. But these are really horizontal, cross-cutting issues that we need to look at. We won't go into detail today. Nevertheless, you know, airlines, maybe we need to think again about flying so much. But there is definitely potential for us to contribute to the recovery of this ecosystem. The next slide shows, again, a little bit the same, the variety of actors involved, and the circular the circular aspect of the tourism economy, from visitors, of course, to accessibility and transport, as I said before, to then the services that you have and the intermediary that you use, and all the people who then benefit from that through jobs and through wealth creation. So again, just to illustrate, and please use these slides if you need them in your programming exercise. In the next slide, we see the extent to which tourism matters in our economy. Here you have by member states the importance of tourism in the economy, on jobs and the contribution to GDP. I won't mention all the member states, but for some you can clearly see how heavy this is, and how impacted therefore the national economies and the regional economies have been through the crisis. Finally, a slide to show the extent of the damage. The tourism arrow line is the red one, and it's actually the one right at the bottom on both of these schemes here. The one on the confidence indicator, and the other one on the turnover in the economy. And you can see the dip is just absolutely massive and devastating. A certain type of recovery over the summer, but you can see that the confidence index is dipping again quite badly more recently, and of course the second wave is not going to help with that, and we really need to do something to get out of this negative spiral in which we are. Of course, not everything can be done through financial support to the economy. We of course all rely also on the vaccines coming in and helping us, but there is an economy to rebuild here in many ways, and probably to rebuild in a better way if we can. And then I finally conclude my side of things by showing to you how important the recovery actually is, and how the different instruments of the European Union at large have been mobilized for this recovery. Again, it's a slide that I would simply recommend that you use if you need to make the case. You can see here the different building blocks of the recovery, the recovery plan for Europe with the Next Generation EU, the long-term budget recently agreed. You can see the CRI, the Corona Response Investment Initiative. You're all very aware of that. Many programs have made use of one or the other measure under the CRI. The SURE program is already in place, up and running. The state aid rules are being revised here and there to make sure that we can recover in the best possible conditions. And really, this slide is very important because it is really in this context of the recovery that you need to read the new specific objective 4.5. We can argue, we can discuss, if you wish, at the end, why there and why not anywhere else. But really, frankly speaking, the most important message is that the legislators were absolutely adamant that the structural funds should make the best possible contribution to the recovery effort, and they chose to put this in PO4. And we are now trying to then digest a little bit the consequences of that, and we will share with you how we think this can happen for the next programming period. But the key message is very much that it's a political decision that tourism and culture are a strong part of the recovery process in the European Union at large. So I will now leave the floor and give the word to Olivier and Johan, who are going to take you through the different policy objectives. Before then, we have Magali and Cataline, who will focus more particularly on the new specific objective 4.5. Olivier and Johan, over to you. And thank you all for your attention. And I'm delighted then to stay on for question and answers at the end.
Thanks, Nathalie, and good afternoon to all. In the coming slides, what we will do is to go through the policy objectives 1 to 5. So there will be one slide per policy objective. And in each slide, so for each policy objective, we will start with the intervention logic, because as Nathalie said, this is really the most important element to decide where to put your actions on tourism and culture. And then we will provide you two examples, one on cross-border and one on transnational. So let's start with the policy objective 1. And here you see the intervention logic is to have actions that, let's say, promote or contribute to innovation. For example, because it's about developing a new tool, and or actions which contribute to business, to enterprises. So the example we have here about cross-border cooperation is called Blue Tour System. It's a project in the program between Italy and Croatia. And the idea here is to help the tourism operators by providing them some tools to develop their business. For example, tools to have a better market intelligence, so to know better what is the tourism market, methodologies to help them to do strategic planning, to provide them also advice about how to develop tourism, and also provide them like a network with their peers to exchange knowledge, exchange experiences.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olivier. Good afternoon to everyone. And I'll then go very briefly into the other project, the transnational project here. And this is a project that comes and that's funded in the Alpine Space program. It's called CC Alts. And here the focus is very much on this, let's say, on the innovative approach in developing transnational camps and hubs in the specific area of creative and cultural tourism for small and medium-sized companies. But it's really very much a focus on this, let's say, on this innovation, on developing these hubs, and that is why it is put on the PO1. And I think we are ready there to go to the next slide. there we are. So we move then into the next policy objective, that's PO2. And here, the intervention logic is that very much, again, that if we are in PO2, the key focus should be on sustainable development. And that is also why these projects that we here have selected are very much linked to this. They have to deliver on the sustainable development perspective, biodiversity, waste, energy, in relation to tourism. Olivier, please.
So the example we have here for cross-border cooperation is called Morava Nature, and it's a project in the program between Slovakia and Austria. And here the idea is to really preserve the ecosystem along the Morava River. And this is done through actions, for example, to protect the biotopes, through education for children, through eco centers, which organize activities along the river. So you see, it is about tourism, of course, but it's very much linked to the river, to the biodiversity. And that's why this project fits very well under the PO2.
And we move to the transnational project, which in this case is called ENEPAT. And here the focus is on energy. It's about energy savings and the better use of energy of buildings. As you know, when we talk about tourism and the development of heritage sites, very often the issue of energy is something that has to be addressed. So here we have a project where partners in 3 different countries, in Spain, in France, and in Portugal, have come together under the Sustainable program to develop specific energy-friendly pilot renovations of buildings.
Next slide. So here now we are talking about the policy objective 3. The intervention logic here would mainly focus on making the touristic or cultural places more accessible. So it's about connectivity, really. And the example we have here in cross-border cooperation is called PODS. It's from the IPA program between Italy, Albania, and Montenegro. And the idea is to study new routes on the Adriatic to improve the connectivity of Montenegro and Albania so that they can attract more tourists coming from the sea, for example, through cruises on private boats.
And I will present the MARA project, which is about accessibility and mobility in the Baltic Sea region. This is a project that specifically focuses on, let's say, a bit new and innovative ways of dealing with accessibility in a tourism setting. It's about e-bike sharing, real-time information for caller bus systems and waterways for transportations in very remote touristic destinations within the Baltic Sea area. So it's very much about trying to develop new mobility approaches in these very remote areas. Because as you know, there are certain areas in the Baltic Sea area where you have a very, very low population density and where we still want to support tourism development. And we are ready for the next slide. And we move into PO4. So in other words, we move into issues related to social Europe, social inclusion, education. So that is also here the intervention logic. Action related to social Europe, employment, education, social inclusion, health, and obviously also on issues related to social poverty reduction, and how projects then can deliver on these particular issues.
So the project we have chosen for cross-border cooperation is called Actelec Domica. It's a project between Slovakia and Hungary, and it's a project which is linked to health tourism. And that's why it fits very well under PO4, because it's about health tourism. Here, the idea is to certify the caves that exist in the border so that they can be used for therapeutic purposes. So, you know, it's about health tourism, and therefore it's under PO4.
And I am going to present to you a project. It's called Come In, and it's funded under the Central Europe program. This is about accessibility for disabled people. So it's very much about the inclusion aspect. It's about small museums that very often lack the possibility and sometimes also the knowledge to have their establishments arranged in such a way that disabled people can enter it. So it's about this improvement of this accessibility. And I think this is something that is very much in line of what we want to promote within Europe in terms of social inclusion.
Next slide. So now we arrive at the policy objective 5. A lot has already been said. We had already 2 Interact events on the PO5. We had a workshop during the annual Interreg event. So please refer to it because a lot has been said there. The intervention logic is, of course, very much linked to the strategy of the territory covered by the actions under PO5. So it has to be linked to the strategy. It has to be implemented in a way that the local authorities, the stakeholders, and more generally the civil society have a say in the decisions, especially in the decisions about the actions. So that's classical under PO5. The example we have here in terms of cross-border cooperation is called Parcours. It's one of the PITER in the Alcotra program between France and Italy. It's in the Mont Blanc area. So this is a strategy for that territory. So it's much broader than tourism, but of course, it also covers tourism. And here, the idea is to develop tourism and to organize it well so that it's very sustainable, because it's a touristic area with 1 natural park, 9 natural reserves, and 13 protected areas. But again, the touristic elements are only part of the whole strategy.
And the example on the transnational side is a project under the Atlantic area, which is called Atlas WH. It's about World Heritage Sites. Again, as we have mentioned, and as you know, PO5 for the transnational programs, it's really a bit of new territory, and we are we have taken this example just to show you how a project, what kind of project it could possibly be that could be funded on the PO5 in the transnational context. This project that we have mentioned here is a kind of it's an integrated approach. It's not only tourism, it's also about economic development, cultural development. It is a network of cities in this Atlantic area that are working together in order to develop these heritage sites. But obviously, if it has to be done in PO5, it has then to fulfill the requirements that we already have shown you and gone through with you at previous trainings on how PO5 should be developed. But in other words, with the integrated strategy, with the model for participation, with a model with a specific structure we need to have in terms of how these projects are governed. So it's just to give you an idea of what kind of project that could be possible to use for transnational cooperation in PO5.
Next slide. Yeah.
And yes, that is our time to join in. It's Katalin Pénzes from the unit where Olivier and Natalie works, in, and together with my colleague Magali Lenoel from our sister unity 1, we are going to present you the recent developments we have been experiencing related to the new specific objective. As we heard, and we all perfectly know, this ongoing COVID crisis is having a devastating effect on all social and economic sectors. But two of them, tourism and culture, have been particularly hit. Maybe another data to illustrate this, this time coming from the International Labour Organization. The European Union's tourism industry is estimated to be losing around 1 billion euros in revenue per month as a result of the outbreak. And this data is coming from April, when we were still a bit more optimistic, I think. As a response, the EU has taken various decisions to alleviate its effects. And the proposal to include this new specific objective under policy objective 4, more social and inclusive Europe, shows the legislators' intention to bolster these key sectors and lessen the socio-economic impact of the pandemic. In other words, there is a very strong political will to support from ERDF the recovery, as Natalie also highlighted it very strongly, and of course to further contribute to the economic development of areas relying heavily on the culture and tourism sectors. And also the crisis is an opportunity for transformation. So tourism and culture as socio-economic sectors refer to the new specific objective was introduced, and if I may say, rightly placed under policy objective 4. We can debate it, of course, but we have to here understand that the overall political intention is broader. So the exact wording of specific objective 4.5 as it is today and as it stands as final, as you can see, enhancing the role of culture and sustainable tourism in economic development, social inclusion, and social innovation. What does that mean? It means that the main aims are, for instance, to contribute to the economic development in areas relying on culture and tourism sectors, and to the creation of resilient and sustainable jobs, to provide access to services in culture and tourism, seeking positive impact on integration of local communities, including vulnerable ones and deprived of ones, if that exists in our regions. To further to strengthen the environment and financial sustainability and resilience of tourism and culture in the long term. So I think this very well illustrates the socio-economic dimension of tourism and culture. What else is new? Well, as also Natalie has mentioned, of course, this is new, the specific objective itself, but I think apart from the policy objective 5, it does make it possible for the programs to cluster all actions on tourism and culture under the same objective. Meaning, instead of scattering all sorts of bits of pieces of actions focusing on tourism and culture, we can put it together under one single specific objective. The last point on the slide is not, maybe not fully new, and it is true for all policy objectives. The Commission, when we assess the programs and assess, in this case, specific objective 4.5, we will base our assessment on the intervention logic. So again, I would like to highlight as very important point here too. And what it means is that the narrative, the description should be very clear and in line with the political intention, which is at the end of the day, the socio-economic development of the cross-border, in our case, the cross-border regions, and of course, ultimately, the Union itself as a whole. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide, we will go a little bit deeper, talking about the different, the types of actions that can be examples of areas that can be supported under the specific objective. Many different types of actions can be funded here if they contribute to, as I mentioned earlier, the economic development, which most actions do have economic impact, jobs, education, social inclusion, etc., which is the policy objective itself. And this, again, let me repeat it, that there should be a very clear narrative in line with this political will and intention. We need to create this hook to the specific objective 4.5 wording. So here we have several and fairly wide range of areas into which investments can be directed. It's not an exhaustive list, but perhaps well demonstrates the spirit, what I have been trying to explain here, as well as the sort of hooks or links you can use to make fit actions on tourism and culture under this specific objective. For instance, if the main aim of an action is to reinforce the resilience of these two sectors, public and private organizations can receive funding for training and employment support, digitalization, social innovation, etc. Or in order to develop existing or new tourism and culture businesses, or develop innovative solutions and new business models in culture and tourism. SMEs, including social enterprises and social innovation in tourism and culture, can be supported. Previously, these type of activities may have been put, or could have been put under policy objective 1, for instance. Another example, investments targeting lesser known destinations and diverse forms of tourism, including cultural, rural, agritourism, etc., can be made, which are leading to diversification of tourism, and consequently contributing to the livelihoods of local and regional communities. What is that if not economic development? So, and we could go on like that. Similarly, support for cultural clusters that contribute to the development of creative industries. Funding can be provided in order to build capacity in organizations in the areas of tourism and culture, where including national, regional, and local level. So I think it's very, very wide, these examples. And as I said, this is only a demonstrative list of actions. And I would like to add that in general, investment should be aligned with the long-term, possibly with the long-term needs of culture and tourism sectors in increasing the social and economic resilience of the two sectors. With this, I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Magali, who will explain some horizontal elements we need to keep in mind. And of course, we are here to continue and at the discussion and answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Katalin. Hello to everyone. So with this slide, we wish to recall an important element that was highlighted earlier by all speakers. It is the intervention logic that will drive the choice of policy objective and specific objective. The main change that you wish to achieve with your intervention will be captured by the indicators. So, what indicators can be used? The first point to highlight is that ERDF related indicators and the policy objective 1 to 5 are used only for respective policy objectives and not Interreg specific objectives. So in other words, under PO1, you use the indicators for PO1 types of intervention. The second point that we wish to highlight is that there are some ERDF that we call generic indicators, and here I mean those that are marked with an asterisk. These indicators can be used for all 5 policy objectives. And moreover, the Interreg specific indicators can be used across the board for all policy objectives and all Interreg specific objectives. Now moving on to the intervention codes. Well, there all intervention codes can be used for all policy objectives or Interreg specific objectives. When it comes to PO4, it's important to recall that the ESF plus type of actions can be selected under PO4. However, when you choose indicators, the request is that you use in the first place Interreg common indicators. And secondly, if this is relevant for your intervention logic, the ERDF indicators marked with an asterisk from the Annex 1. And this is an important point, and there I would like to refer as well to the Q&A that was published by Interact after the event on the intervention logic. So to conclude on indicators, at this stage, it's not envisaged to modify Annex 1 of the ERDF regulation, but one important point to highlight is that it is possible to use as indicators for the specific objective 4.5, the 2 indicators from PO5 that are marked with an asterisk. And you have them here on the slides. Capacity of cultural and tourism infrastructure supported and tourist visits to be supported sites. So that's it for me on the horizontal element, and I give the floor to the next speaker on macro-regional strategy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Magali. The next speaker is me. It's Johan here back again. Now, I would like to give you a snapshot of projects, examples of projects that have come up as a result of the work in the macro-regional strategies. And we can see this in all 4 macro-regional strategies that projects within the field of culture and tourism are featuring quite heavily. And these tourism and culture are also priorities in all 4 macro-regional strategies. We consider that the macro-regional strategies are also very useful and important vehicles that liaise stakeholders to work on joint cross-border, interregional and transnational projects. And that is also why in your programs you shouldn't be surprised, I think, if these kinds of projects and these sort of initiatives will come up in upcoming calls. What we can see here is that because when we speak to our key implementers in the macro-regional strategies, what they then see are the main kind of, let's say, the main interest here is about preserving cultural heritage, to promote sustainable tourism actions, green mobility. It's about scale up people skills, digitalization, recovery plans against the pandemic, and health tourism, as we also have heard about here earlier today. So I think we can see that there are very many, actually very many topical issues that are already being supported under that fall, let's say, under the framework of the macro-regional strategies. And we also had another project that covered all 4 macro-regional strategies in cooperation with the Council of Europe, called Routes for You, that was completed in July this year. So these issues are important, and they will certainly come up, and they are very much featuring in the macro-regional context. We take the next slide, please. Here, another project example that is specifically focusing on the smart growth, if you like. So link here to PO1. It is this I-NUREC initiative, which is something that was developed under within the framework of the US Air macro-regional strategy. It addressed specifically cooperation on smart specialization actions, and it also didn't only include EU countries, but also all EPA countries that are included in this particular macro-regional strategy. So the objectives here were to support sustainable inclusive growth driven by culture and creativity, to identify job opportunities and entrepreneurial innovation, to activate interregional partnerships in order to facilitate SME recovery processes, to identify value chains, to enhance accessibility, and so it was really very much focusing on this broad aspects, very much an integrated aspect of things, but with a focus on smart specialization. And I think we are ready there to take the last slide. Well, I just wanted to say a few words about an initiative that we have supported within the Commission. This is a work together again with the macro-regional strategies in order to see and look at the specific challenges brought about by COVID-19, and also how we try to reboost the sector in a sort of a post-COVID perspective. And we have used an external expert for this, who has been helping us to provide some input on this. But what we see is that it is then very much important to develop new tourism products and models that are also, and which are also more, let's say, which are more local and which are more based on sustainable types of tourism. And in this, it's also good to activate chambers of commerce networks in order to also to promote this digital transition for the small businesses, because we can see, and we have seen in the wake of the pandemic, but that there is still quite a lot to do there in develop, let's say, further develop this, the digital platforms of various types in these small companies. And then new jobs, smart integrated management, safe destinations, and crisis management platforms of various types. So all these things are issues that we can see for the future post-pandemic are of importance, and these types of projects will most likely come up in the next programming period. And I'm ready there with my presentation.
Thank you to the entire team in D1, D2 for this massive team effort. Natalie here, back again, just with a concluding remark before we give the floor back to the Interact colleagues and open the floor. You have guessed from the presentation that you can support culture and tourism, and particularly their recovery, under any of the policy objectives that are available to you. And please don't take this as a carte blanche to do just about anything in that sector. It's not a carte blanche. I would say it's much more giving the programs a very high level of flexibility. Having said that, we cannot support the entire recovery effort with very small resources of Interreg. Therefore, we really insist that you need to examine, explore exactly what can benefit from Interreg support in your program area, and then fit it into your intervention logic. If you simply say, we put aside 20 million, 50 million, 60 million under SO 4.5 with no intervention logic behind it, and to do just about anything like, oh, I support my castle renovation, you support your castle renovation, and then that's it, this will really no longer be what we want to see. So we want to see a narrative. Why did you choose to support the recovery of tourism and culture in this particular way? And then have you put it in the right place? Since we can't do everything, we really have to agree on the priority and what really benefits from cooperation. This is what really distinguishes us from the rest. And don't forget, there will be a lot of investments from national, regional programs, even from outside structural funds. So let's not bear the brunt of recovery on our shoulders, and let's really focus on what benefits from working with the neighbors or working across a macro-regional area or across a transnational area, and then put it in the right place according to the intervention logic that we want to follow. That's really what I wanted to say as a concluding remark, and thank you again to the colleagues, and over to you, Interact and programs.
Thanks a lot, Natalie and Katalin and Magali and Olivier and Johan for this very comprehensive overview. Very much appreciated. And Natalie, with your concluding remarks, you were kind of anticipating one of my questions. I will maybe put it more into a thought, is that when programs started discussing programming and tourism and culture, I mean, the key place where it was PO5 with this strategic, holistic, cross-thematic approach to the development of a given territory. And later on then, tourism culture appeared under PO4. PO4 became mandatory for land border cooperation programs, CBC programs. And isn't there a risk, but you put it nicely, there might be a risk that now with tourism and culture being possible under all the PO, that in fact we actually move away from a strategic, holistic development into the fragmented approach to tourism, a little bit of tourism here, a little bit of tourism there, a castle renovation here, a castle renovation there. But you strongly already voiced that that's not what you want. So that would lead me maybe then to another question, and that is, at some point of time, you will get the programs on your table with the intervention logic. So what's actually you are looking at? And the question would be, I mean, maybe you can tell a little bit internal secrets. I mean, how is this working between D1, D2, and the other possible affected DGs in the Commission? How will you look at this during the assessment of the draft programs?
Well, thank you, Philippe. Of course, it's a very, very relevant question, and indeed, we recognize that there is a risk that some programs might move away from using PO5 if they had chosen to use that, because PO4 has become mandatory in the meantime, which was absolutely not in the plans of the Commission, and this is imposed now by the other legislators. For land border programs. So indeed, the risk is there, absolutely. We can't deny that. Having said that, it doesn't take away from the program authorities and the stakeholders contributing to the programming process, and from us, the responsibility to be honest about what we want to do and to do it in the most effective and efficient manner. So, as I said, if we see that undefined actions are all bundled under a tourism label without any logic behind it, this will not survive the screening process in the Commission. At least it won't survive completely. We will really come back and ask for the narrative. What is it that you want to change? And please be more specific about how you want to do it. In the Commission, D1, D2 will work with each other on screening the programs. By the way, we also screen mainstream programs, and therefore we will be able to see what is being done, for instance, in a specific area with a regional OP or with a national OP. And it's not just us. The programs will also then be screened by other Commission services. We have a full-scale inter-service consultation process, which will be used extensively for all the programs. That's always the way we do it. And therefore, DG GROW, for instance, and DG EAC, so DG GROW, it's quite clear what they are. It's formal internal market. DG, they have tourism under their responsibility, and DG EAC is education and culture, and they have culture under their responsibility. They will be very involved because of this common collective exercise to recover and certainly to support the tourism and culture sectors in the process. So they will be involved and they will ask questions. And don't forget, DG Environment and DG Klima will be involved, which means that, again, I hinted at the need to really think tourism in a much more sustainable manner than we've done in the past, possibly. I think Interreg is more or less there because we've always supported more sustainable forms of tourism through the nature of our programs, but DG Klima and DG Environment will also consider the program. So don't expect to just get away with anything. And that's why I wanted to end with these remarks, that it really has to fit in. And I also really insist that we don't have so much money to spend, and we have other priorities as well. We do have accessibility issues. We do have green issues. We also have the Interreg specific objectives 1 and 2. So all in all, we don't have that much to spend on tourism and culture. Therefore, we should really see what would benefit from this cooperation. And we will screen that. We will screen for the cooperation dimension. And I think the colleagues in other DGs, of course, will screen with their glasses, which are sector glasses or horizontal glasses like sustainability, but it will be scrutinized. So that's why we insist on this robust intervention logic.
Thanks a lot, Nathalie, for this very clear message.